Hi, Roy here, and welcome again to Season 2 and another edition of The Right Has Left. I am your host, Roy Garden, where we talk all things Trump politics, the White House, the Trump administration, and just to, again, refresh your memory in case some of you have not watched my previous episodes, or this is your first time watching The Right Has Left. I was a Republican for some 52 years, and I voted for Donald Trump on his first term go-around, and he wasn't even in the White House probably 6 months, and when I finally realized, what the hell is going on with this guy? And after that, of course, I left the party because this guy, I think, is... well, for lack of better words, not following the actual agenda of what the Republican Party actually stands for. And its main format, of course, is less government and taking things back to the states, which they kind of do, but, you know, he has turned the Republican Party into a fear factor, an authoritarian United States, which is not what the Republicans are supposed to be doing. And so therefore, I kind of take deep dives into some of the things that he does. So having said that, let's go ahead and get started on this edition of The Right Has Left, because I, as with all my podcasts, have a hell of a lot of stuff to talk about. And let's talk about what's going on in Minnesota, and let's look at some couple of things in more detail. I do these things on the show because sometimes the major news networks don't have the time, nor do they perhaps not choose to do some deep dives. They kind of just go over some things and brush it over. And on this show, I like to dissect some things. So let's talk about the Insurrection Act that, Donald Trump now has backed off on perhaps initiating this, but let's just talk a little bit about that to start this show off. So President Donald Trump threatened to invoke 1807 law and deploy, U.S. troops to quell persistent protests against the federal officers that were sent to Minnesota and to specifically Minneapolis to enforce his administration's massive immigration crackdown. I like to call them paramilitary Gestapo agents, for lack of better words, for some of the things that they do. And breaking news that's not even on my crawl that you see there. A federal judge has actually invoked an order that the ICE agents stop using such aggressive force tactics against the people who protest. Now, most of the protesters are peacefully protesting. True, there are some there that are like throwing rocks and bottles, and of course, the ICE agents have every right to retaliate. Now, when I say they have every right, the tear gas and things like that, but not to pull out their, automatic weapons and just start shooting people down because they're upset. That's not how things work. And of course, they go on the fact that, we're trying to defend ourselves. You know, most people, when you see protest lines, police officers have shields and things like that. These guys don't have anything because they don't have the training. The ICE agents that are being recruited in masses right now, half of them don't even, I shouldn't say half, but a lot of them don't even have a high school education. They are recruiting anybody and anything because they got this massive billions of dollars of budget that they took from healthcare and from the people of the United States so they could fund these aggressive immigration tactics. So if you don't believe me, just look it up, okay? You know how to Google. So anyway, this threat came from a day after a man was shot and wounded by an immigration officer. Now, we're not talking about the first shooting. We're talking about there was another shooting where a guy got shot in the leg and the ICE agent himself got hurt. So the federal judge said enough is enough. Well, right after that happened, of course, the Justice Department said they're going to start investigating the mayor of Minneapolis and Governor Tim Walz because maybe they had something to do with getting this perhaps passed, and they're trying to keep the ICE agents out of the state of Minnesota. So now they thought, well, we'll just go ahead and investigate. You know, this is always retaliation. Every time Trump doesn't get his way, he retaliates because basically he can. You don't do what I say, I'm going to make sure that you pay, and I'm going to hurt you. That's basically what happens. So there goes Tim Walz and the mayor of Minneapolis. They must be doing something behind the scenes to make this happen. Now, of course, that shooting further heightened the fear and the anger that has been radiated across the city since an Immigration Customs Enforcement agent fatally shot Renee Good earlier this month. Now, we all know about Renee Good, a very sad situation. This woman here, of course, lost her life, and there was some more investigative and some news released on that in here, and I'll talk to you in just a second about Renee and what they found. So most of the majority of Americans say ICE agent's shooting of Good was unjustified and inappropriate. She had gunshot wounds to the chest, forearm, and possibly to her head, according to new documents just released by the Minneapolis Fire Department. Renee Nicole Good, an anti-ICE protester, was killed in Minneapolis. As I said, she was shot 4 times by immigration agent Jonathan Ross. I talked a little bit about him on my last episode, which if you want to go back to that, you definitely should. He said that he was clipped by her with her SUV during a standoff last week. Of course, video, which is all over the place, shows that to be totally different. But that was the incident report that was filed, and of course, everybody, of course, stands behind what he has said, due to the fact that this woman here, of course, Ice Barbie, we like to call her, but Kristi Noem is her official name, of course. She said that she tried to run him over. And that he had every justifiable right to shoot at her, not once, but he had every justifiable right to shoot her at her 4 times, once in the head and other places, because she tried to run Jonathan over. And, of course, that's obviously, as we saw in the video, not true. So the incident report, which was filed by the Minneapolis Fire Department, revealed that the 37-year-old who was shot 4 times, the paramedics discovered the mother of 3 unresponsive in her car with blood on her face and her torso around 9:42 a.m., according to the report. Now, the reason that I bring up that specific timeline, as you are well aware of, there was a doctor on the scene even before the paramedics got there, because ICE finally said, we need to call an ambulance, But there was a doctor on the scene right after the shots were fired, and the ICE agents refused to let that gentleman go on the scene and see if he could care for her. All right. I'm not saying that, because of the fatal wounds, she would have, lived, or he could have done anything. But this sad part about all this is that doctor was not even allowed to attend to Miss Good. They made him stand back. And ladies and gentlemen, that is just god-awful sad, that when you've got a doctor on the scene says, let me take a look at her, and of course the ICE agents made a barricade around her and said, nah, I don't think you can do that. Let's just wait for the ambulance to get here. I don't care if you're a doctor or not. So the department stated that she was not breathing, had inconsistent and irregular pulse. Officials wrote first responders observed, of course, the 2 gunshot wounds on the right side of Good's chest, one in her left forearm and one with protruding tissue out of the left side of the patient's head, as blood was seen flowing out of her left ear. A 911 caller also told dispatchers that they shot her because she wouldn't open her car door. Transcripts obtained by news outlets showed, send an ambulance, please, ambulance, please. The caller said Good was pulled out of her crashed SUV and brought to a snowbank and the sidewalk to separate her from the escalating scene that was going on. And, of course, her spouse all the time was standing right there watching all of this go on, and she was just, of course, heartbroken. And they were both, of course, using their cell phones to videotape ICE's activities, and of course, what happened there. So, again, this whole thing, and I'm going to go back to Kristi Noem here for just a second, all right? Because this is important. This is what she said. She alleged that Good had been part of a group of protesters who had been stalking and impeding ICE agents throughout the day. Her mom, Donna Ganger, told the Minneapolis Star-Tribune that her daughter was one of the kindest people I've ever known. And as you are watching the protesting going on, as I talk about this, you can see that, okay, let's give a bit of the doubt. So what if the protesters are following along at the 10 feet line, which is what you have, and videotaping ICE's activities? And as a protester, you have the right to ask them what they're doing, and you're not impeding them as long as you stay at a distance. Okay. Now, if you're going to create a blockade, and then you're kind of crossing a fine line. This is why the mayor of Minneapolis and even Tim Walz said, if you're going to protest, which is your constitutional right to do so, and it is also your constitutional right to videotape what they're doing, all right, you have to do it at a safe distance. And you can get within 10 feet of them and say whatever you want to. It's your constitutional rights. The ICE agents do not have a right to come up to you and grab your camera and detain you and say, let's see your proof of American citizenship, all that. Because they're doing that because these are basically redneck guys and perhaps gals out there that just act like, I've got the federal badge, I'm going to do what I want and throw you to the ground. And as you can see, they are pulling people out of the cars. We're going to talk about another one here in just a second about that. But this is why the federal judge did what he did. These people are getting out of control. They're like paramilitary Gestapo agents that are just rousting everybody and anybody that they can. As I said, they have been given the mandate to arrest 3,000 migrants a day. And it's like I said, 95% of these people don't even have a criminal record. When this thing all started, it was supposed to be, we're going after the baby killers, the insane people, the people who have murdered people in other countries, and everybody, of course, in the United States. Yeah, that's great, Donald Trump. I'm voting for you. Let's go do that. Let's get him out of here. And of course, the next thing you know, they're after anybody who's got brown skin. So there you go. Now, this other part of the story on the Minneapolis situation. A 6-month-old infant and 2 juveniles were hospitalized just this past Wednesday night after federal agents reportedly fired tear gas at a vehicle, according to the city. The Minneapolis Fire Department was called to the 600 block of the 23rd Avenue North at 9:20 p.m. for a medical emergency. The city of Minneapolis said initial reports indicated a federal agent had deployed tear gas at a vehicle in the area, causing the infant inside to experience breathing difficulties. The Jackson family, who were in the vehicle, talked with ABC News on Friday. The family told ABC News that they were on their way back home from their son's basketball game when they found themselves caught in the crossfire between protesters and federal agents. The ICE agents came forward and they were lined up with their mace. Destiny Jackson told ABC News, according to the family, gas grenades fired at their vehicle set off the car's airbags, trapping them inside as gas filled up their vehicle. Bystanders were able to open the vehicle doors, allowing the family to get out. After getting out of the vehicle, Destiny said that she realized that her 6-month-old son was not breathing. I had to give my baby mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and people were pouring milk all over my other kid's eyes. She said, I thought I was dying, honestly, and the way I felt, I couldn't imagine how my kids felt because I'm a full-grown adult. So I just know it was even worse for my children. The city of Minneapolis said the first responders worked through the crowds in the area and were able to reach the family. And by that time, the infant was breathing and stable, but in serious condition. Again, these ICE agents, they're just like the training, ladies and gentlemen, the training. These people have almost zero training. They get a crash course, they get a badge on them, and they say, go out there and find the illegal immigrants. And then, they get this massive list, and they just, they're supposed to be doing specific, canvassing to get specific people. They don't. They're just out there rounding up anybody and everything based on how they look, what they're doing, or the area that they live. And this is what it's all come to. They're out of control. And Kristi Noem is responsible for that. And, of course, she blames everybody but them. It's everybody else's fault, not my agents. It's everybody else's fault. You're not letting them do their job. What the hell is their job? and that's what's sad about all this. So again, you're seeing tear gas fired into some innocent bystanders, and a child, almost died from it. And that's what this thing has come to. We are turning into a police state. You can't put it any other way. And if you're comfortable with that, there's something wrong with you. All right. So I just had to bring that up because you have to understand that this stuff is getting out of control. And when you're looking for people that are being shot at now, I mean, they're not. They get pissed off. They're not even using tear gas or anything else. Now they're using an excuse. Well, they tried to harm me, so that gives them the excuse to pull out their weapons. And now, just like what they've been doing in Israel, they're just they're with protesters there. They just don't care anymore. I'll just kill you then. Get out of my way, or I'm going to gun you down. And this is what's been happening. And I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, you're seeing it for yourselves. So anyway, because of all this now, Joe Thompson, who was the career U.S. Justice Department attorney, best known for prosecuting social services fraud in Minnesota, has now resigned, along with other experienced attorneys at the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office. The move comes after top Justice Department officials pushed the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office to investigate the widow of Renee Macklin Good, the person shot and killed last week by ICE agent Jonathan Ross. Yes, let me repeat that. He said, I'm not going to do that. And so he said, if you want me to do that, I'll resign. And, of course, he did exactly that. He resigned. So NPR News had learned that Thompson, who is 47, also objected to the DOJ's decision to exclude the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension from the investigation into the shooting, and the department's reluctance to investigate Ross, according to a person familiar with Thompson's decision. Veteran Assistant U.S. Attorney Melinda Williams, Harry Jacobs, and the Thompson and Thomas Calhoun Lopez also resigned from all of this. And if you're asking me why, because they don't believe in what's going on. The federal government has been basically stonewalling the state of Minnesota's investigative unit. They wanted to look at the car that Miss Good, died in, and they won't let them have access to it. Why? I mean, it's black and white. You know why? Because they don't want their nose stuck into that. As far as Kristi Noem and the rest of the Justice Department and Homeland Security is concerned, our agent acted in good faith and in self-defense, and the case is closed. If you don't like that, that's just too damn bad. That's how we're going to write it up, and that's how it stands. And, of course, you heard Vice President J.D. Vance say that, he's got total immunity anyway. You can't do anything with him. And that is not true. He does not have blanket total immunity. Yes, he does have some immunity on a federal level for his job and the performance of his duty, but not total blanket immunity. The guy can be prosecuted on a state level for manslaughter if the state of Minnesota had any access to any evidence and could put a case against the guy. But the federal government, of course, is not going to let him do that. The prosecutors were also concerned that immigration enforcement is diverting resources away from prosecuting major fraud cases in the state. Williams oversees the office's criminal division. And of course, they also helped secure the sex trafficking conviction of former Minnesota Republican Party operative Tony Lazzaro, and also prosecuted a drug dealer, Aaron Broussard, whom a jury found guilty in the fentanyl overdose deaths of 11 people. Thompson had served as acting U.S. attorney for Minnesota and then first U.S. attorney, taking on a higher profile in the past few months. So what I'm trying to say here is this guy has a huge line of credential. He is more than qualified, and he wanted just to simply open up an investigation on a state level, as most states are allowed to do. And in the past, before Trump took office, there always was a great relationship between the feds and also on a state level of any investigation of any person. But now that has all disappeared. And of course, again, I didn't have this on the news crawl, but Trump just did another blanket pardoning of people who have committed fraud and committed crimes because they've all contributed to his campaign in one form or another. So again, he's handing out more blanket pardons to crooks and criminals because they're all good old boys because they've helped him along. So there you go. This U.S. attorney, God bless him. You can't blame him. This is what people should do: is instead of being a ring kisser to Donald Trump and his administration, if you don't believe in what is going on and what integrity is, then you just resign. So. And that's exactly what they did. And there are more and more people starting to finally get on board and doing just that. They're resigning instead of being told to do something they know in their heart is not correct. So, speaking of Donald Trump, he was in the state to give an address on his economic agenda. I'm talking about Michigan. And he was touring the Fords River Road complex in Dearborn, Michigan, and during his walkthrough, the entertainment division TMZ reported a staffer yelled pedophile protector at the president, again exercising his constitutional right to speak freely as he so desires. Of course, he probably shouldn't have done that on the job, but he did. And the president presumably referenced to the controversy over the federal records regarding the convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. If you saw the video, which I'm running right now, he flips him off. And he also said, "Fuck you." That's probably going to get bleeped, but that's exactly what you said. You can see him mouthing it. Before giving them the middle finger, a lunatic was wildly screaming expletives in a complete fit of rage, and the president gave an appropriate and ambiguous response, White House Communications Director Stephen Chung told The Hill. Democratic National Committee Chair Ken Martin chimed in with a criticism in the post on the social platform X. So, as you by watching this video, you can see that Trump just didn't take that. Now, what's the criticism about? The president of the United States, whether it be Trump, Biden, Bush, I don't care who's in office, the office is supposed to be dignified, and you're supposed to be able to take the heat. You also don't respond to protesters. You're going to get them every single time, no matter where you are. And most of the time, the Secret Service is protecting the president, and they just kind of walk him by. And they don't even really acknowledge what's going on there. Now, this guy right here, of course, Trump is totally different. He'll sit there and pause and scream at the guy, and as you saw, unpresidentially flip the guy off. This is a guy who claims, I'm a Christian, I'm a Christ follower, I love Jesus, and then, of course, you see all the time now, he's just swearing on the air, dropping the F-bomb, and telling people off and degrading female reporters. So I wonder about that. But anyway, you saw what happened there, and yep, that's real presidential. Just give the guy the bird and I'll take care of him, by God. So, moving on. A bipartisan group of lawmakers from Capitol Hill sought to reassure Denmark and Greenland on Friday that they supported Denmark's control of the Greenland despite of what's going on there. As you well know, Greenland is back in the news, and it's again, I just cannot figure out what the hell's going on here with the president wanting to take Greenland. But as we move on to the Greenland story, this is going to be my top story for my podcast, because we got to do a little bit of deep dive into this. So right now, a bipartisan group of lawmakers just returned from going to Denmark to talk about Greenland. And they just did this on Friday, and they supported Denmark's control of Greenland despite President Trump's vow to seize it one way or another. But there appeared to be little progress in solving what has become a crisis in Denmark and Europe more broadly. Even as the delegation was meeting with the Danish officials, Trump said at a different event in Washington that he was considering using tariffs to pressure countries to accept the U.S. annexation of the territory and some 2,000 miles from Copenhagen. Senator Chris Coons, the Delaware Democrat who led the delegation, said at a news conference after a meeting with Denmark's Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, that the United States was grateful to Denmark for being a good and trusted ally and partner, and for the sacrifice of Danish soldiers who served and fought and died alongside Americans in the wars after September 11, 2001 attacks. His comments were in sharp contrast, I'm going to say that again, in sharp contrast to J.D. Vance, who said last year that Denmark was not being a good ally for what he said was an insufficient military presence in Greenland. And Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska has teamed up with Democratic Senators Jeannie Shaheen of the ranking member of the state Senate Foreign Relations Committee to introduce a bill to block President Trump from taking over Greenland. The legislation, the NATO Unity Protection Act, would prohibit the use of Department of Defense or Department of State funding to blockade, occupy, annex, or otherwise assert control over the sovereign territory of a NATO member state. The legislation appears aimed directly at talk within the Trump administration about seizing control of Greenland, even though Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth told senators at a briefing last week that they are not planning a military operation against Greenland. It also comes as Republican Don Bacon, who is a Republican from Nebraska, joined House Democrats to introduce legislation called No Funds for NATO Invasion Act, seeking to preemptively block the Trump administration from using military force to acquire Greenland. And of course, as you know, Greenland is governed by Denmark, a NATO member that deployed 18,000 Danish troops alongside American forces during the Afghanistan war. Now, let's pause there for a minute and talk just a little bit about this. If you cannot read between the lines, Trump's obsession with Greenland has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with protecting our territory. I mean, we've already got existing military bases there. Some are closed down. They can easily be reopened. Greenland has been very open about that. You know, just reopen your bases. You're more than welcome to come up here and do that. It's about the minerals. Trump is obsessed with money. He is obsessed with wealth for himself and his family. It's just like what's going on in Venezuela. It is not about drugs. It has nothing to do with drugs. Yeah, they got Maduro out of there. Great. That was a wonderful move. And of course, I didn't have it in my crawl, but as you know, he's now got the Nobel Peace Prize given to him by the other party that she's trying to get into office. And Trump, took the Nobel Peace Prize and then said, don't let the door hit you in the butt on the way out. He doesn't care about her being back in office. He likes what's there right now, because he likes to have the crooked politicians in there. Why? Because they're now selling oil back to the U.S. And what is Trump doing with that? He has created offshore accounts, and all that money is being put into there, and he has a sole solitary right to distribute it however he wants to. That money, you know how he's going to distribute it? He's going to distribute it right back into his bank account. And this is why he wants Greenland, is because of the minerals up there. We have more than sufficient protection, and Greenland knows that about covering the areas up there from China and Russia, and it's also a NATO ally. And right now, if we try to invade Greenland, NATO would step right up there and protect that country, because Denmark is part of the NATO alliance. Trump has already come out and said NATO's stupid. We don't need to belong to NATO anyway. Back when in his first term, he wanted to get out of NATO. He doesn't think it's needed there. Again, it's him wanting the minerals up there. That's all it's about, And Greenland said, you want the minerals, our minerals? We'll be happy to sell them to you. But he doesn't want to buy them. He wants to take it. That's what he wants to do. He wants to take it from them. It's ours. It's mine. And so, you've got to understand that's what it's about. And, of course, there's already been legislation to say that if the legislation, of course, it's not going to go anywhere because of the Republican Senate, but, there's already legislation. They said they would impeach Trump. And these are some Republicans that are defecting. said that, if you invade Denmark, you're going to be impeached. Of course, the Republican Senate, who are ring kissers to Trump, his sole allies on there won't let that happen. In fact, there's again, Trump's. If you've been watching the news, Trump is down to 39% in approval ratings right now. He is going down the sewer fast. Because of the things that he's doing. People are upset with his immigration policies. They wanted the border protected, and that was it. And may I get rid of the real bad ones out there, but now they're on a mass deportation of anybody and anything. That's upsetting him. The American people, not him, but the American people. And they don't, the economy. He hasn't done jack with the economy other than these tariffs. They're upset about that. So, this is all just playing in favor of the Democrats, who probably will take the House back during the midterms. They don't have much of a chance with the Senate. They might gain a couple seats, but not enough to make a difference. But with the House, yeah. And he knows it. But you know what? He doesn't care. He's moving forward with his own personal agenda. And this, folks, is a personal agenda. Revenge against anybody that did him wrong. Revenge against all the Democrats, revenge against the blue states. You don't see all of these ICE agents. There are a few here in Florida, by the way, but not to the massive things that you see in Minneapolis. You've got ICE agents that are working some of the blue area territories here in Florida, like ICE agents are now in Orlando. Orlando has typically gone Democratic, so guess what? Now that they're there, they got them there, and some of the areas around Miami now. So anyway, getting back to Greenland, I'm getting off track here. Diplomats say that some of the personnel advised to leave the U.S. air bases in the Middle East, and now that we basically going to wrap up Greenland. But you can see what I was saying. It's about the minerals up there. And things are settling down now in the Middle East a little bit. But as you are well aware of, Trump was backing the protesters in the Middle East. Tehran has warned neighbors hosting U.S. troops that it would hit American bases if Washington strikes, a senior Iranian official told Reuters on Wednesday, as Iran seeks to deter Donald Trump's threats to intervene on behalf of the protesters. Late breaking news on that. He has backed off on doing any type of military assistance to the protesters. Things have quieted down quite a bit there since this event broke out. And even though he said he was going to, help the protesters, and of course Iran said we will not kill any of the people involved with that, and they had not. And so things are starting to settle down. To give you some background on this, if you're hadn't been following what's going on in Iran, it began with some shopkeepers taking to the streets of Tehran more than 2 weeks ago. That's when it kind of spiraled out of control, with more than 2,400 protesters who are estimated by one human rights group that had been killed in a government crackdown. Originally, demonstrations began on the 28th of December and was over a sharp fall in the value of Iranian currency, but broadened into an anti-government protest calling for an end to the rule of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Protests now appear to be slowing down, as I just said, with sources telling the BBC Persian of a heavy security presence in place of Tehran and the surrounding area. And the internet, of course, as you know, was shut down by the government, so there was no news going in or out. So it's kind of hard to tell what is really going on there, other than what the U.S. has in there for eyes. And but France, Spain, Finland, Belgium, and Germany, they all have summoned Iranian ambassadors over the violence, and the UK has also done so, citing the brutal killing of Iranian protesters. However, China, Iran's main trading partner, has rejected Trump's new tariff of 25% on those who commercially deal with the regime. And of course, that's what Trump, of course, is again using, is tariffs. So things have settled down in Iran, as far as we know. Trump, again, has backed off on his rhetoric about, assisting the protesters. And so right now, things back in Iran. And, of course, Trump has said, well, we blew them up all at once. We'll blow them up again. As you know, that bunker thing that happened last year, internal sources have said that he didn't do all the damage that he said he did to stop the nuclear building of their war machine there. And of course, that general that did say that got fired immediately. You're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to say everything was destroyed. You're supposed to say what I tell you to say. And of course, that general got fired. So again, you don't cross Donald Trump. Simple as that. Another story that's going on that you may or may not have been following, and I've got to handle this next story with kid gloves, and it has to deal with Sasha Riley. And the reason I say kid gloves is, and of course other networks have been kind of lightly coding this, is because the evidence. It boils down to either you believe what William Sasha Riley is saying, or you do not. He was interviewed by Lisa Voldenberg. Voldenberg is a Canadian journalist, and she got a hold of this gentleman, and he had a great story, a touching story, a sad story to tell about his abuse with the Epstein. All right. And so I'm going to take this very slowly. And like I said, things in this story is all alleged. I have to cover my butt with this. But it is telling. It is shocking. And it is making its way around the internet. Whether Lisa's interview with this gentleman is true or not, you have to be the judge on your own. That's the reason the networks are being very careful as to pick the story up, is because they want something to back up the story. So let me go ahead and kind of give you some background on this. And as we go along here, you have to be the judge. So here we go. Audio testimony attributed to Sasha Riley is going viral online after alleging extreme abuse linked to the Trump-Epstein network and naming figures like Jim Jordan as one of them. And the claims are currently unverified, circling via Substack and on social media with no confirmation from courts or mainstream investigations so far. The material contains serious allegations connected to the Jeffrey Epstein scandal and names several high-profile political figures. Importantly, these claims are being shared online and are not confirmed by courts or mainstream news outlets. I have to keep saying that because you need to understand that what you're reading about is all alleged. It's from the interview. So here's some breakdown on what's being claimed and who is involved and why the content is so much going viral. Strictly based on information provided. Now, first and foremost, who is Sasha Riley? According to the published material, Sasha Riley is described as a decorated Iraq war veteran and alleged survivor of extreme child trafficking. Now, I'm not providing the link, but you yourself can go on YouTube. That's where most of these major stories about this interview is. Just go on YouTube and look up Sasha Riley, put that in the search engine and you'll find the videos, okay? And you can listen to it and watch it for yourself. I'm covering this simply because if, in fact, this interview is, in fact, true, then this is pretty shocking. And that's why I'm talking about it. But again, there is zero evidence to back up any of this. And if Congress has anything and they see this person's name pop up, then you can start stitching something together. But as it stands right now, there is no evidence or nothing to back up this person's commentary in this interview. But if Congress has this person's name and if they have anything else that they can link to it, and this is why it's probably coming out, is that although there's presently no evidence or nothing to back up Sasha's claims, then perhaps somebody in Congress can start going through some of this material, even though it may be detracted, blacked out, and they can put some two and two together and maybe do a little bit more deep dive, because right now that's how it stands. So anyway, a person named Lisa Noel Bolding, whom I just showed you on that clip there on that graphic, claims she recorded Riley's testimony during phone interviews between July 19th and July 24th, 2025, and it's just now coming out. Riley is said to have been adopted in 1977 and allegedly trafficked from early childhood, first to relatives and then later within what is described as the Trump-Epstein criminal network between his ages of 9 and 13. So what do the viral recordings claim? The viral content includes 6 unedited audio recordings, which the publisher says remains in her custody, with copies allegedly shared with police and trusted allies in several countries. The testimony describes alleged trafficking of impoverished children under 13 years of age, and there were claims of rape, torture, and murder, and allegations of forced participation in child pornography smut films also is claimed in these audio recordings. He also claims that a child was shot and killed during a snuff film production. Assertions that these acts occurred within the Trump-Epstein network. The publisher states that these accounts were released in the public interest and that the investigations are ongoing. The testimony is spreading rapidly online, as I just said. That's how I found it, due to the release of unedited audio recordings that claims that Sasha Riley is willing to testify and undergo a lie detector test before Congress or anybody else, in references to ongoing international investigations and safety relocation and the direct naming of powerful political figures within these allegations. Alleged links to public figures. According to the testimony summary, Riley claims that he is willing to testify against several well-known individuals, including President Donald Trump, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, and Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. These claims are presented as allegations only, currently circulating through social media posts, interviews, and a Substack publication, which I'm a part of, not through official indictments or verified court records. Evidence claims mentioned in the publisher asserts that supporting material exists, including pornographic films and videos, CPS and FBI reports related to William Kyle Riley, who is alleged to have trafficked Sasha, a military report involving a court-martial linked to child pornography documents said to be obtainable via FOIA request. It is also claimed that some evidence has been suppressed and that corroborative materials are meant to be supportive of what the publisher calls truthful testimony. The publisher emphasizes that victim testimony should be considered primary evidence, while online critics point out the lack of independent verification and tangible evidence is actually available for review. So, and that's my point. The corroboration, the evidence, even though the journalist says it's there, where is it? It's like everything else with the Epstein files, the redacted portions that the people can't see, names and stuff. They say they're protecting people. We need transparency. If, in fact, what Sasha is saying is true, then this obviously needs to be investigated. Some of the things that you can maybe tie this to, you remember when this thing all broke out, Trump was going after Republicans and saying that, you can't vote this thing, you can't do it, my friends will be hurt. So you look back at this and say, are those some of the friends that maybe might be hurt? Including himself, if the Epstein files get out. Trump has been doing a lot of stuff to detract the media from talking about the Epstein files, and then you see this come out, and it's not getting a lot of news play, because although it's very powerful and damaging testimony, and if this person in fact was trafficked as a child, is so damn disgusting and sad, but in this day and age, you want to back the stuff up. Now, she says she has it and it's in a safe place. Well, we got to get that out, and they got to get it to Congress, who's investigating the Epstein files. And some of these redacted documents that have the names blacked out. Perhaps maybe his name's on there, and there should be some more deep dive. But, until then, all you've got is a social media story, and it's powerful, and it needs to be looked at. But you got to have the evidence to back it up. And if we can get that, my God, and he said he'll testify before Congress. Well, let's get him before Congress then. Let's get his testimony on record, and he needs to be protected, because if this guy knows what he knows, there's probably somebody out there who wants to do bodily harm to him. And so he needs definite security, and he needs to get before Congress. And that's my final say on that. Before I wrap up this edition of The Right Has Left, I mentioned about the Nobel Peace Prize being given to Donald Trump, and where he said he's so grateful and yet didn't say crap. As I wrap this up, Maria Corina Machado, when she did that, she said she was grateful to President Donald Trump after meeting with him Thursday and presenting him with that prize. The president called it a wonderful gesture and mutual respect. And, she's trying to do that to win him over so she can be put in office. And this is who the people of Venezuela wants in office, is her. But again, even though he's a wonderful woman and all that, she basically, after he did all that, says, now it's mine. And, don't let the door hit you in the butt on the way out. That's basically what it came down to. He wants to leave who's presently in there. And, of course, the Nobel Peace Prize Commission said, it doesn't change a damn thing that Trump's got it. You have to earn it. And, it is still hers. She's the one that earned it because she was fighting for the people of Venezuela. Trump didn't earn it, even though he's got it. As they said in their official restatement, it's the person and what they have done that actually gets the prize, not the person that is presently in possession. The prize, the trophy itself is a tangible piece of artwork, but it's the person who did it that earns the prize. So we'll wrap it up with that. Again, quite a beautiful gesture on her part, but unfortunately, it's not going to get her anywhere from what it looks like. So that is my program for this week on The Right Has Left. I do look forward to your comments. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And until next week, you try to have a good week. This is Roy Garden. Take care.